everybody, and welcome to Immediate Immersion Live, where we're all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. And today we're going to be talking about effective grading techniques to make your grading a little bit easier. So I hope you enjoy what we're going to talk about today. If you have anything that you'd like to add, please put it in the chat and comments. I'd love for you to share. Also, let me know where you're watching from, and if you are a newbie, type in hashtag newbie, and if you've been here before, type in hashtag returnee, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. I have one of my students here on today typing in returnee. That's Jeremiah. Had him for last year, and he's my class again this year. So welcome, Jeremiah. So today, let's go ahead and welcome. Rachel is back. She is a returnee as well. Nice to see you here. So I was just reading your icon, what you're saying. Sorry. So today we're going to talk about effective assessment things, how to grade better for our language classes. And the first thing I wanted to talk about today was traditional versus alternative. The traditional type of assessments that we have are generally paper and pencil type assessments, except for speaking, obviously. But they don't really work well to get a holistic picture of what students can do in the language. And so just, giving a simple multiple choice test about listening or reading, or a vocab test, or a grammar test, those grammar tests, I always love those. They're not designed for comprehension in mind. They're really kind of designed to trick kids and see if they recognize the nuances of the language. Those questions that would say, I like to eat the. And they'd have that the in there, so that determines what kind of word is going to follow. And they'll have in the choices 2 foods and 2 drinks. Obviously the drinks are out. One food will be masculine, one food will be negative. One food will be feminine. And then they're supposed to pick the food that goes with the that they put right before the blank. But then kids will say, well, I didn't like that food, so I didn't choose that one. I chose the other one. And that's really not wrong, but those kind of questions are trying to trick kids to pay attention to the nuances, or the questions that would do verb conjugations. And there'll be 5 questions, and there's 5 possible verb conjugations. Obviously, the last one is the one left over. The kids don't really read the whole sentence to figure out what goes in there. They look for clues, like, the personal pronouns. They look for those, and then they plot based on that. But then they put in tricky ones like my friends and I. And the kids only see the I and think it's the I form, when it's actually the we form. But they're not reading the whole sentence. They're just looking for these little clues to be able to answer the question, but they're missing the whole point. Those are what traditional types assessments do. We also have, vocab tests. Vocab assesses vocab out of context. And in real life, vocab is never out of context. When kids are, or anybody is seeing words or hearing words, there's always a context. There are words surrounding them that help give clues to what the meaning is. They're not just listed in a blank list with no words around them like they are on a vocabulary quiz. So these things aren't really fair in how they assess, and they're not really assessing the whole picture. So then we can look at alternative type assessments. And these are ones that look at more the holistic language learner rather than on specific things. For example, For a speaking assessment, I don't want a kid memorizing a skit or memorizing a presentation and then presenting that, because that's really not how language works. And that's a whole different skill. And that's more that drama, that play type thing. It's not real language. It doesn't mean that the kid can actually use the language skills off the cuff like they have to do in real life. When they meet someone on the subway, or they're making a reservation for a restaurant or a hotel, they can't anticipate everything that the other person's going to say, and they're going to have to be able to respond spontaneously. So I don't like those pre-made types of assessments. I want my kids to be able to speak off the cuff. So we have conversations in class all of the time. And so these are not pre-planned. My kids cannot study for them, and I can give them grades based off of those. Or I have them make up a story on the spot and don't give them a lot of time to take time to memorize their lines. So they've got to speak from the drawings that they make about this story. Spontaneous. So those are some alternative types of assessments. Other ones for like writing. Instead of having them write rote, memorized type essays like, hello, my name is, I live in, I am so many years old, I have a dad, a mom, a brother, a sister, a dog, a cat, a goldfish, etc. That is, they memorize a few phrases and then keep repeating them in different ways. That's not real language. Having them write a story about fears or what they did over the weekend, or write a letter to a friend. These types of things are real world, and they give me a lot more knowledge about what my students can do with the language. So those are the differences between traditional and alternative. There's always confusion about formative assessments, not just with teachers, but also with students. And it's not a real difficult concept. Formative assessments are meant to give feedback along the path of learning. So there's still time for the kids to take action on that feedback before the final summative assessment on that standard. I equate this to, so my kids can understand better, it's practice. So if you play a sport, it's your practices. If you play an instrument or you dance, it's your practices. Because kids tend to think that formative assessments don't mean anything. And that's not true. They are feedback so that you can improve before the next big thing comes along. And no athlete, no dancer, no artist, no musician would discount their practice time, their rehearsal time. Because although those times don't count, because they're not in front of an audience, they're not playing on the field, without that practice, they're not going to be good at their summative task, which is the concert or the play or the big game that's on Friday nights. So you need that practice along the way to be successful. And what does a good coach do? And in that example, a teacher, is to give that feedback during that practice time so that the students can take action on that and get as good as they can before the summative task comes in. So that's what formative assessments are and how they really need to be taken in. In our grading system, they don't count for a grade, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. Why am I forgetting his name? Albert. Couldn't think of it for a minute. Albert Einstein says that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So that's what I'm talking about here. Yes, the formative don't count as in they don't add up to their report card grade, but they are the pieces that build the skill that does show up on the report card grade. And without proper formative assessments with appropriate feedback, students don't have an opportunity to improve before that final grade gets solidified. So they're extremely important. They're the things that they could be easily counted, but they don't count. But they are important because they are the path towards the big thing at the end, the summative assessments. And so they are the feedback along the path of learning. Where summative assessments are at the end of a learning period. It does not mean that the learning is over. It just means I need to take a snapshot of where a student is at this particular time. After I've given them a few times for feedback through formative assessments, now I need to take a quick snapshot to see where the student is along the proficiency pathway. And so that's what a summative assessment is. It does not mean it's the end of the learning. It's just the end of this learning cycle. And they can continue to improve later on. And that's just like a game or a concert. The game or concert can be successful or not, but it doesn't mean that's the end of learning, because then they go back to a few practices before the next game or the next concert or the next play or whatever might be leading up to that. So think of it like that we are giving formative assessments are these stepping stones to get the kids to success. And the success, the chance for them to show off that success, is in those summative assessments. Now, my rule is I don't like to waste a heck of a lot of time on class with assessments. This is one of the mistakes that districts and states and the federal government make with mandating all of these common assessments that we have to do, district assessments, state assessments, federal assessments that we have to have. Because when you take time to give these assessments, kids aren't learning anything. And a few years ago, our English department, we're a middle school, they added up all of the district testing they have to do, all of the state testing that they have to do. They added all of that up and figured out that about 10 to 11 weeks of class, 1/3 of the school year, there was no instruction because they were spending way too much time on assessing what the kids should have learned. And Blaine Ray always said, and I don't know where this originally came from, I don't think it was his original quote, but you can weigh a pig as much as you want. But if you don't actually feed it in between, it's not going to get any fatter. So you can assess kids as much as you want, but if you aren't teaching them in between these assessments, they aren't going to get any better at them. So taking 1/3 of a school year out for assessments seems ridiculous to me. And so it's not something that I do in my classroom. I limit my assessments to 3 per standard. So in my school, we have standards: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. If you use actful, you got to break them up a little bit because they combine them. And I don't like the combinations. You can't really help students with those combinations. So they have the presentational stuff, the writing and the speaking are grouped together, and the listening and the reading are grouped together, and I want those split out. So for me, I've got my 4 standards because I'm an IB school, so our standards are listening, reading, speaking, and writing. I have 3 assessments per grading period at least for each of those. So that's a total of 15 assessments except for level 1, and I'll talk about that exception in a minute. Per grading period. I don't need more than that to find out what my kids can do in the language. It's kind of like when you think about like a final exam in high school. How many questions do you really need to put on that test to know whether they know it or not? My old school used to say we used to have to fill the 2 hours. Kids could not be finished with an hour or a half an hour left. They wanted no more than 10 to 15 minutes left in the class when kids finished. They did not want kids having nothing to do. They said, if we're giving you 2 hours, you need to use them. And if you're not using them, we're going to take them away. So what did teachers do? No longer 100 question quizzes. They made 200 and then found out some kids were still ending early. So then they made 250 and then 300 questions. Really, how many questions do you need? It's the same kind of thing. How many assessments on a standard do you need to know whether the kid has mastered that standard or not? I don't like 2 for each one because if the kid did well on one and poorly on the other, it's a split difference. And I really don't have a good assessment on that. But if I have 3, you need at least 3 to identify a trend. So it could be bad, good, good. It could be bad, bad, good. It could be good, bad, good. But I get a trend I can see. Is the kid progressing in an upward trend? Are they in a downward trend? Are they in a flat trend? I can see that with 3. So I generally like to structure my assessments as having 2 formative assessments and 1 summative assessment. That's what I like to do in my class, so I have a trend so I can figure out the grade at the end. And luckily my school district understands that the math does not always work out with grades. The way we use math to figure out grades was not the way that math was intended to be used. So grades can be very inaccurate. You could have a kid who did really, really well for a while and then bombed a couple things, and now the grade is really, really low. And it takes a lot for it to go back up. So the math does not always give the true picture. So we're given permission, as long as we can prove it evidence-wise, we have the evidence in the grade book, we can override our grade book to make it more accurate. Now, I never do this in the negative. I never lower a kid's grade. But if actually, I think we use the median. We use the median grade. And so if the median grade does not come out exactly as I think it should, like if I'm looking at a kid's grade in writing, let's say, and they did really badly on the first writing, but on the second and the third, they did incredibly well, like top scores. I don't necessarily want that first grading experience to hinder their overall ability, because when I look at their overall ability, it's at the top. It's not at the mid where that lower one's going to pull it down to. So I have the power, our district has given us the power to override the grade and make it more accurate. So what I do is, in that case, I would increase the grade. It won't be at the top level, but it's going to be as close as I can get it to account for that lower grade in the beginning. But that could be just a learning curve. It was the first one. They didn't know how everything was going to go. Or they just could have had a bad day. And so those anomalies I can take out by using my judgment, because I have a college degree and I can look at the data and say what the math is telling me is not what is actually happening with that student. So I like that we have that ability to do so. And even if you don't technically have that ability, if you're increasing the grade and not artificially increasing it, you have the evidence to back it up. I don't think any student, parent, or administration is going to call you on it. If you lower a kid's grade from what the computer says, then you might have some explaining to do. But even before the school district I work in now, I used to up the grade if I saw the evidence there, and I never had a complaint, either from administration or from parents or from students. Nobody complains about a good grade. So think about that. Think about the whole big picture when you're looking at your assessments. You don't want to have too many that you are spending more time in class assessing than you are teaching. And how many assessments do you really need to be able to figure out what the kid can do? And then if the math does not make sense when you look at it, then do what you can to reflect the actual abilities of your students. Are there any questions or comments about formative or summative assessments at this point? I'll give just a moment while you're thinking, because it takes a little bit for your responses to come in. Okay, if something comes in along the way, I will go ahead and address it as it comes up, but let's move on to digital assessment tools. There are lots of tools in the digital assessment realm. There are tools for creating and grading assessments, and there are tools for making assessments that can help you as well. So we used to use a couple of ones before. I can't remember their names. I'm sorry. I wouldn't recommend them now because there's so many other options. But what we used to do before the system that we use now, which I'll talk about in a moment, we used to use these programs that would print out like a mini Scantron sheet with each kid's name on it. So remember the old-fashioned Scantron sheets with the Scantron machines? Well, we don't have them at my school, and we haven't had them at my school for over a decade. But sometimes we gave multiple choice quizzes on certain things. And to make it easier to grade, we would give these kids these little bubble sheets that we cut out, that we copied on the copy machine, we cut out, and the kids could answer them, and then we would scan them either with the camera on our laptop or with our phone, and it would grade them. Sometimes it took 2 or 3 times to scan it. It wasn't always the perfect, but one of the benefits was kids did not have to use a number 2 pencil. They could use anything to color in the bubbles, which helped as well. And then the data would be compiled in the program, and we can get some statistics. And it worked for a while, which was great. Some were free, some had a small fee attached to them, but they weren't very versatile. You were stuck with multiple choice. You could do nothing else with them. And it sometimes, if you had to scan certain papers 2 or 3 times to get it to read them, that was time consuming. It took a little bit longer, and I might have been able to grade it manually much quicker. And that's why I don't recommend them now, even though they still exist out there. What I recommend for giving your students assessments digitally, because I don't do it on paper and pencil anymore, just for not only environmentally, but it's easier for me. We have to keep track of data, and data is easier to keep track of when it's in the built in the computer system. So I use Formative.com. I know a lot of people like to use Google Forms. They have a test builder in there. The problem is smart kids know how to look at the source code of the Google form. And in the source code, it gives away the answers. Now, the average person, not going to notice. But some of our kids are really savvy when it comes to tech. And they can look at the source code, and then they can see what the options are in the form, and they can figure out what the answer is from there and literally cheat. So I don't use that either. Plus, again, you're limited in the types of assessments you can give. So a few years ago, we found a tool called Formative.com, and it has been amazing. And you don't have to use it just for assessments. You can use it for practices or activities. You can build all kinds of things in there. You can include video, sounds, voiceovers, pictures. You can do all different kinds of assessments: short answer, essay, matching, multiple choice, fill in the blank, scrambles, sequencing. There are so many things that you can do with it. So it only gives you the basics for free. I think it's only multiple choice questions you can do. You might be able to do fill in the blank. But you don't get very much. I pay $15 a month, and I only pay for it during the school years. I don't pay during the summer months. And I get a ton of features with that. So I get all the types of questions I can put in there. So I can have kids give me a speaking prompt answer in there. They can click record and record an answer right in there if I want to do an oral type assessment through it. Or they can watch a video and make commentary about the video if I want them to do that. I can do a multiple choice. I can do a fill in the blank. I can do a short answer. I can do matching. I can do sequencing. I like doing the sequencing ones. Paulino, Google Forms. If students have district-provided Chromebooks, you can use the locked mode and they can't look at source or go to another page. Yes, we do have district-provided, but some of those features are turned on and some are not because we have a class called ComTech. And so if we put some of those restrictions, Paulino, on, they're not able to do some of the stuff that they have in their ComTech classes. So there are ways to kind of help with that. But I just found that for me and for our team, Formative works a lot better and it's a lot more versatile than that. But thank you for your information. Rachel says, yes, it used to be called Go Formative, and they changed their name to just Formative. And as I said, it's really versatile. In fact, let me share my screen for a minute here. Let me open up a window here. Give me a second because I wasn't prepared to do this, but let me open up a browser window. And our kids have found so many different ways to get around a lot of things. We have a way of locking down even websites, and so I would lock down Google Translate, but then kids would just go to Google and type in what they want as a Google search. So then I had to block all of Google during test taking. So they couldn't do those kinds of things. Okay, screen share. Let me move to that slide. Okay, perfect. So Formative.com. So this is my Formative. I said I do pay the $15 a month. It gives me some options in it. And let me go to a Formative and let me make a test Formative here so you can see. So I'm going to add one, a new Formative, and look at all the options that I have. So I can add audio. I can embed something in like a video. Yes, Rachel, you are so true. She says, if they put as much energy into learning as they do into cheating, they'd be geniuses. Absolutely. That is so true. So, okay, I hit my button. Oop, what'd I do? I didn't want that. Let me go down here. Okay. So, okay. I can put an image, paired passages, slide deck, text, a video, even a whiteboard. So I can do, those are the content types I can have them do. They can give me an audio response. They can categorize things. They can drag and drop. That's what I use for my sequencing. File response. They can add a file to their response. Fill in the blank. Free response. Graphing for math. Hotspot. Hot text. I'm not sure what those two do. They don't really apply to anything that I do. An inline choice. So that's like in the middle of a sentence, you give them a choice. Pick which one fits this one or that one. Match table grid, matching, multiple choice, multiple selection, numeric, a resequence, short answer, show your work, true and false, or a video response where they actually have to record a video. So these are all the different types of questions and things that I can add to them. And because I have a paid account, I could, let's say if I were to do a multiple choice, let me put that in here, multiple choice. You type your question here, and then you have your choices, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and if I could spell, then you, and then you can put your answer key, let's say the answer is 3, I can do this, which you can't do on the free one. I can make it random, which helps with the cheating because every time the kid scrolls, it reorders these. So this will not always be choice A, B, C, or D. It scrambles it for every kid as they move. So if let's say it's C here, and the kid scrolls down to question 4, and then goes, wait, I think I need to read question number 5. This is no longer C. It's still checked where he checked it, but it might be A, B, or D. It's moved around, and it constantly moves. So that it's harder for kids to cheat. You can tell, you can do in the free one, whether it's required or not. You can give answer choice explanations. So as they're taking the test, once they submit, they can't change the answer, but you can give them explanations right away. They can review their test right away because you're saying, oh, it's not 4 because tres means 3 and cuatro means 4. So you can explain that in there so they can see it right away during feedback. During the test, your kids can send you questions here based off a question that they have on one of the questions. You'll get a notification and you can answer them right back, which is an awesome thing to do. So they don't have to come up and go, I have a question about number 4. I thought D meant pharmacy. Is that what it means? And they're like giving away answers. This way they can go ahead and give me that message right here. I can go and see the exact question they have a choice on, and I can respond to them in the appropriate way without giving away the answer. So I like that. Edit here. So, and I can make all different kinds of tests or practices, which I really, really like. On top of that, when they take the quiz, I don't have any kids assigned, I see them taking it live. So I see a whole list down here of all my students. Let me see one over here. Let me go. I will unassign this because it's not going to apply. But I'll put it right here for today so we can just see it. Period 4, I'm assigning it. I can open and close it as needed. So right now it's open. And these kids were kids I had from last year, so that's why they have grades in this particular quiz. But I can see, as they're taking it, I see if they get the question right or wrong as they go along. I can see where they're going. I can see who's finished with the question. I can click in and see the exact answer that he put in here. And I could type feedback for Jonathan and say, Jonathan, great job. And I could send that to him. Or I can see that Kyle got this one wrong. And I'll say, although it does snow in Alaska, the answer was something, whatever it was. I don't remember what the answer was. Something else. I can give him that feedback and send it to him. I can also, after grading, I can go through and I can select multiple students and give them all feedback on a particular question. So everybody who got question number 5, I can select them all in one feedback. I can send them back feedback about that question and why they got that wrong. And they can see that when they log back in. Plus, I get my statistics. So I can see which questions are doing well, which questions are doing poorly. And so I can go back and analyze those questions and see, is it the question that's a problem? Is it the wording that's a problem? What is it with that question? If it was a bad question that all my kids got it wrong, then I might throw that question out and then figure out how to improve that question next time. Or it might be we found out a few years ago, we found out that our kids were having trouble in level 2 answering calendar-based questions, like when did this happen? They couldn't remember the days of the week and the months and such like that. So we analyzed what we did and said, well, we really work hard on that in level 1, but we drop it in level 2 thinking they already know it. Well, we said, okay, well, that's not obviously the case because they keep getting these questions wrong. So then we went and analyzed the data and said, okay, we will review that data for the first 13 weeks of school. We're on trimester, so that's trimester 1 for us. And that improved our overall scores, and we didn't have to do it again because we didn't see the same trend in our level 3 classes, and we didn't see the same trend in second and third trimester. So we knew we didn't have to do it any longer than that. They needed a year and 13 weeks, and then they would have mastered the days of the week, months, dates, all those kinds of things. But this data gives that to us, and I can see it right away. Another great thing, how many of you have ever made a mistake in the key, and then you have to either hand go back and grade them all to fix the mistake? You don't have to. I can go right back into the key. I can go, oh, the answer wasn't supposed to be 23, it was supposed to be 22, and I change it, and it will automatically fix everybody's grade. I don't have to manually go back and figure out the grade. So that really, really helps well. This is a new thing, this summary. This is new. And we haven't given any quizzes this year, so I don't have anything to really work on here. And this has only got 2 students in it because they took the quiz last year and I haven't erased them yet. But it gives you some more information that you can see as you go in here. Now, also, I like that I can open and close it. If you do a Google form, there's not an easy way to block kids from sharing that and working on it outside of class. But here, I go in here and I can go into adjust settings and I can close it down. And when I close it down, guess what? Nobody can take it right now. So it's blocked, and I can open it just during class, which I like. I don't schedule it to open and close. I manually do it. But one of the paid features is you can schedule when it opens and closes. See right here, schedule open and close times. So I don't do that. For kids who get really distracted, so if there's too much text on there, I can display each item on a separate page so they're only focusing on one thing. I can change how they see. They can see their scores, but they can't make any edits after submissions. Or I can hide them all out. Or I can allow them to go back and fix. I can return scores after they submit, or when I close it down, or not show the scores, or instantly. And I can show or not show the correct answers. So I don't have them show the correct answers because I don't want them to share them with the other kids. I can display the questions in random order. I don't do that. My questions are always in sequential order, so I never do that in there. And then you can do secure exam mode, which is something that that Paulina was talking about. But this is an upper paid feature. I don't pay that much for that, so I don't use it. I can lock down. We use something called ClassWise, which is a monitoring software that I can see on my computer and watch what my kids are doing. And I can block certain websites, turn off their internet, close their browsers, all that kind of stuff from my spot. So that's how I control that with that one. So I really like the versatility of this, the data that I get from it, because we're all about data at our school and how we use it to help improve instruction and learning for our kids. And this one, they cannot go to the source code. It won't let them. And also, one thing that I learned to do as well is when I give a text for reading, I don't type it out as text. I type it in Google Doc and take a screenshot of it and import it as an image, because our kids have found a way to copy that text, get around some things, and get it into Google Translate. But they can't Google Translate a picture as easily. Still can be done, but it's not as easy. So that's why I put all my text stuff, I put that in there. Like a reading sample is always in picture form that I've typed in a Google Doc, and then I take a screenshot and then include that in there. It will grade some of the things for you. Unassign. I'm going to unassign this. I don't want them to do that. So as I'm creating assessments, certain ones can be auto-graded. Obviously, multiple choice and true and false can be one in there. But even if I do a short answer and I put in here, what's your favorite color? And then I can put in multiple colors in there. I only want them to think of warm colors as a favorite. So I do red, orange, or yellow. So they're going to see this. Number 3 down here. What's your favorite color? They have to type it in. And if they don't type in red, orange, or yellow, it's going to mark it wrong. So you still have to go and look over them, because sometimes spelling errors or something might come into play. But it still gives you a good, quick feedback for grading. So not everything can be self-graded, but you can grade it yourself and put it in there. But a lot of the stuff can be self-graded, and it does make it a lot easier. And then I save these. As you see in this particular class, these are all the assessments that we did last year's class. And I can use them again year after year after year. I can make changes to them without having to rewrite the whole thing because it's already here. And so it helps me save a lot of time along the way. A lot of time along the way. You can also, for certain kids, let's go to my classes. You can, let's say a kid is special needs. Sophia is not, but I can go in there and put in accommodations. Different types of accommodations. Text-to-speech accommodation or a time limit extension in there, and add that in there so the computer will take that into account. If it's a timed assessment, you're only giving 10 minutes, but Sophia gets double the time per her IEP, you can put that in there and it will give her 20 minutes to take the assessment. Or if certain kids need things to be read out loud to them, you can give them headphones and use the text-to-speech option. So again, it's much more versatile than what you can do with Google Forms, and I like it a lot better than Google Forms. I've used Google Forms in the past, and for some of you, it may work, and that's great for you. But I have found that this works a lot better for me. It's more versatile, and I can do more things with it, and it's easier to maintain. And it's a little bit easier to keep kids from doing naughty things on it. It's not perfect. There is nothing that's perfect out there, but it's a little bit easier than Google Forms is to do. And kids can use a Chromebook or their cell phone if they want. Before we had one-to-one with Chromebooks, the kids use their cell phones to answer the questions on these. So I really like this program, and it's one of the programs that I use. The other one that I use is in creating. So let me go, and you all know this. You've all heard of this before. ChatGPT. Now, what I use it for is if I have a story that I wrote. Let's actually go back to Formative for a second. Formative.com. Let me get a story out here that I have. Oh yeah, I see how this is a picture for the reading. Let's see. Actually, let me go here. Let me get a reading out real quick here. Okay, so if I get a reading here, oop, that's not what I wanted to open. I wanted, okay, that's definitely not what I want. Chapter 1. Is this it? No. Okay, where is it that I want? Okay, let's go back here and find it from here. Okay, so here's from Spanish 1. And this is what I'm looking for. And I go down to a reading. Here's a reading. Let me copy it. And then we go to ChatGPT. Please write 10 multiple choice questions in English based on the following text. Please include an answer key. So I wrote the story, but I hate writing questions. Plus there's bias that comes into the questions I write. I tend to ask the similar questions over and over and over again. So I find that ChatGPT can do it much more quickly. So it just wrote for me 10 multiple choice questions. And it's writing now the answer key for me. Okay? So now I have an assessment that I could use. I wrote the reading, but now these are the questions I could use. I could also say, please write for me a quiz. Let's see, how do I want to put this? For me, a resequence quiz based on 10 different things that happen in the story in English where students have to put them in chronological order. which is another thing I do for my reading stuff. So here it's got the questions, and it's not perfect. Never just believe what ChatGPT tells you, and take that for granted. Always read through what you're giving. Like, I want to take this football americano out and just type in football. I don't want it in Spanish there. I don't want them to be able to hunt and peck and go and find the key words. But now I've given them 10 sentences, and I would put them in that resequencing drag and drop on Formative, and they now can take these and move them around and put them in the right order. And then Formative will grade that for me. So it's another way to assess reading comprehension in there. So using ChatGPT to help you, not completely, but to help you create assessments is it's a great tool. But again, it's a tool. It's not a teacher. It's not meant to replace you as your job. Use it as a tool to make your life easier doing some of these things. I write the stories myself because I write them personalized about kids in my class and what's going on. So I use those stories, but the questions ChatGPT can make for me, and it saves me a lot of time. I can even have them write a writing prompt based on this. So they can do a writing prompt or a speaking prompt based on this. So kind of like more of an OPI, where they are getting some feedback passively, like reading or listening, and then having to respond to it either orally or in a written way. So you can make them more versatile types of assessments. So ChatGPT can be your friend and can help you in a lot of ways. You can use it for free. I do pay $20 a month to get the GPT-4, and it's well worth my $20. I use it for a ton of things, not just for creating assessments. It helps me do a lot of stuff. Stuff like, I'm an IB teacher, and some of the things, the statement of inquiry is one of the hardest things to write when you're writing an IB unit plan, because you've got to put all these pieces in there, and it is it's a cumbersome sentence that comes out of it. So, but I can give all the information about my plan, and ChatGPT can come up with that statement of inquiry in the proper IB format. Rachel says, my department head used ChatGPT to write reporting comments for us to use in our report card program based on our core competencies. Awesome. You can use it to write can statements for what you're working on that day. Lots of different things. One of the great things I like to have it do is sometimes certain things are really difficult to explain. So I'll say, explain this as if you were talking to a kindergartner. And I'm not trying to insult my students or whoever I'm trying to explain that to, but it's a way that the program understands you want it really, really simplified. And another awesome way to do it, put your long reading in, and you can make an embedded reading from it. So I can say, can you please reduce the above story to 5 simple sentences? Okay, it's too far back. I have to put my story back in there. Let me do it this way. What was my question I wrote? Let's do this. Can you please read it there? And not above the following to 5 simple sentences. And I'll put the story back in. I'm still doing the same thing, but I'll go like this. You can ask it to tweak too. So when it finishes, I'll do it. Please rewrite those in Spanish. Or let's just do it into a different language. In German. And so now I have a really basic story, which is the basis of an embedded reading. And I can have it make a progressively more difficult and a progressively more difficult to get me to the final episode. So it can really help me create those embedded readings easily based off the text. So ChatGPT can be a friend, but remember, you never take exactly, like I would not just take this, copy it, and give it to a student. I read through it. I make sure it's what I want it to say. I may have to change a couple of the words, but it gives me a good working format to work with. And so I really like it. It really does simplify my life. And this year I have 4 preps, so I definitely need all the time-saving techniques that I possibly can. Plus I have 2 brand new teachers who are new not only to the teaching profession, but also to teaching with CI. So there's a lot there on my plate this year. So those are some ways to use technology. Let me go back to our other slide. To make your life easier when it comes to assessments and keeping track of that data. Because we want to know how well our kids did on an assessment. We want to know which questions they excelled at, which ones they didn't, so that we can go further and analyze what the problem was. Was it our instruction? Was it the student? Or was it the question itself? And lastly, we'll talk about meaningful feedback, because that's the whole point of assessment in the first place, is to give feedback. At its most essential basis, feedback is what you're trying to give. And grades are nothing more than feedback, or they shouldn't be anything more than feedback. But you want to take time to give meaningful feedback to students. I know, what's the app? It's on my other screen here. Let me pull it up here really quick. I know that a few teachers use MOTE, M-O-T-E. Let me type it in here. It's an oral feedback machine. So you just talk into it and you can share these oral feedback, because it's a lot easier to talk your feedback than to write it out or to type it out. So they use this program, and they can give oral feedback to students. Sometimes in your learning management systems, you can do that. If they're doing a Google Doc or some kind of Google Doc, whether it be a slide deck or a form or something, you can put comment feedback in there as well. So there's lots of different ways, but you want to be able to give meaningful feedback. On my rubrics, there's generalized feedback by the rubric, because I'm checking certain things on the rubric so the kids can go back and look at it. But I also put on my rubrics one thing for them that they did really well, and one thing for them to improve on. So I want to give them some compliment, so I always write one thing that they did really well. And to be honest, anything more than one constructive feedback is not actionable by a student. You can't give them 2 or 3 or 4 things and expect them to be able to implement them the next time. So I pick the biggest thing that they really need to work on that will make the biggest impact on their writing or speaking or whatever assessment I'm giving, and I'll put that in there. This is the one thing you need to work on. It's not going to be things like adjective agreement or correct gender of nouns. That stuff is small, minuscule stuff, and it's not going to hinder comprehension. We want our kids to be as correct as possible, but that's minutia. They're not going to get that in the first few years of language instruction, and that's not going to hinder comprehension. I'm going to be more focusing on maybe they need to focus on the past versus the present, or they need to focus more on the subject-verb agreement. That's really important, because I'm getting confused when they're going, yo tiene, I, he has. I'm getting confused at this point, and I'm not understanding what's going on. So I'll write one piece of feedback in there. But on everything that you grade, you should give them some sort of feedback. So in our learning management system, I can put feedback as I'm grading. So I give them the grade, but there's a comment section. I can type in the comment that they can see. And I try to do that on every assessment, whether it be, a simple formative assessment, or we call those learning behaviors, or it's a summative assessment that gets graded on an IB rubric scale. So I can put these comments in there so kids, I give them the encouragement and I give them something to grow on. And that's the whole point of what grades are. If your school uses letter grades or rubric grades, those are just shorthand for the feedback. An A says, you're doing awesome. That's the feedback. It's shorthand for that. But I like to give a little bit more detailed in there. Like a lot of my kids will get a lot of 7s or maybe a 6. Let's say 6. It goes out of 8 in IB. And a 6 is like a high B grade. A 7 starts the low A's. And my kids will say, well, what do I need to do to get that into that 7-8 range? Well, I point out of the rubric where it says what they need to do, but I'll say, here's a key thing. In my A grades, in my 7s and 8s, I'm looking for dialogue to be in an essay. So when they're writing a story, I want to see dialogue written in there. And if they only write one line of dialogue, that's not really enough. They've got to integrate dialogue in there. So I'll put that as a comment. I'll say, you're doing really, really well. You're at the top of my 6. Here's a suggestion for next time. Try to put in some dialogue into your story. That's it. Because I know if they add the dialogue, that will at least get them out of the 6 and into the bottom of the 7. And if they have more control over that dialogue, that's going to push them from that 7 into that 8. But that's the kind of feedback I want to give them because I really want them to improve. And I'm looking at the things that will make the greatest improvement for the least amount of effort for the kid first, before I start working on the minutia. Gender, adjective agreement, those things are really, really hard. They're easy to teach, but they're not hard to do for non-native speakers. And even native speakers make mistakes sometimes. And so I don't want to worry about that and stress them about those things. Let's do the things that are easily fixable, like adding dialogue, or make sure that when you're writing in the past tense that you're staying in the past tense and you're not going past, present, past, present, past, present, past, present, which they do in English as well. So all of these things are things that will help making your grading more productive. Does anybody have any questions before I let everybody go? While you're doing that, please do like and subscribe. It really does help get this to more teachers. Share the link with other teachers you think might help. It might help them. And if you're watching this on the replay, please feel free to put questions or comments in the comment field. I do go back and check them and respond, and YouTube really likes when there's lots of comments in there. But I hope you found this helpful. And if you have, we have something that goes into much more detail on assessment. Let me put that in the link here. Bear with me a second. We are starting up our Assessment Academy at mm.us/academy. It's 10 classes that go into much more depth, from proficiency-based grading to creating all different types of assessments over 10 weeks. And then we're adding an 11th bonus class where I'm going to request samples from you. So you're going to provide samples from your students, writing and speaking samples, and we're going to grade them together using a rubric so we can kind of all get an idea in what I call calibrating a rubric. So looking at the things that I look at when I grade those things, which are comprehensibility, complexity of the sentences, and overall control of the language. And we'll talk about that in that class. But many teachers find that very, very helpful because we're taking their live samples and all of us are looking at them together, and we're giving our opinions on why we think it should fit where it should fit. And it's really helpful to go, oh, I never thought of it that way, or you're right, or you get really, you go, I thought I was grading too hard and I'm really grading really, really easy, or I'm right on where everybody else is. So it's a really helpful program, and if you're interested in getting more into the nitty-gritty, you can register at mm.us/academy. The classes are held live on Sunday mornings. If you can't make that time, don't worry. We're recording all of the classes, and they will, you will have access through all the rest of 2023 and all of 2024 of that. The classes, I think the last class is December 10th. We don't do it during Thanksgiving weekend, but every weekend starting September 24th. So if it's something you're interested in, please check that out. If you know someone else who might be interested, you can have them there. The dates and times are all listed there, and you can see the kind of content that we'll be covering. I don't see anybody having any questions, so I wish everybody a great night. Next week, I will be out of town, so I will not be able to do a live, but we are going to do an encore replay of setting up your grade book. So it was a live that we did last year. It went really, really well. A lot of people liked it. Over 250 people watched it. So I thought that was a successful one. And since we're at the beginning of the school year, many people might need that. So I will be re-airing that next week, 5 p.m. Pacific. So you can watch that then if you'd like. Otherwise, I wish everybody a great week. And I will see you guys live in 2 weeks. So everybody, have a great night, and I wish you all the best. Adios. Hay una familia.